Hello, I'm Helen Billows, and this is the Trauma Nerd Podcast. I'm a registered psychologist, EMDR therapist, and I work exclusively with trauma. This podcast is for people who want psychologically sound explanations without pop psych shortcuts, toxic positivity, or excuses dressed up as empathy. We'll talk about trauma, responsibility, relationships, and recovery, backed by nuance, honesty, and of course, actual evidence. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Trauma Nerd Podcast bonus episode. I think this is episode 12. I meant to only do 11, but like I mentioned last time, I get ideas and then I want to follow through with them. So today is the bonus episode. Now, this one's a little different because I don't really have a script. I just kind of have a few things I wanted to talk about because I want to just talk about what I have learned after over 7,000 trauma therapy sessions. I sometimes say that I've done 7,000 EMDR sessions, which I technically have, or over, like I said, over 7,000. But I actually think to say it's only EMDR is selling myself short because the larger umbrella has been EMDR, but I have done there are other therapies that have been incorporated in that. Like I've done internal family systems, imagery rescripting with schema therapy and schema therapy concepts, ego state therapy. What's it called? DNMS by Shirley Schmidt. Needs meeting protocol. I can't remember exactly what that stands for, the acronym. But anyways, all of these different trauma therapies, healing approaches, but they've all been within the scope of EMDR and the EMDR protocol. So I'm going to share with you today what I have learned in over 7,000 trauma therapy sessions / EMDR sessions. I don't have a script. I'm just talking. So if it's a bit messy, I apologize. So the first thing I wanted to say is one thing that has struck me through my experience and everything that all the people I've worked with, the hundreds of people that I've worked with, possibly approaching 1,000, just over, I don't know. There's been a lot of people. Anyways, that how much your brain wants to heal. So I've seen a lot of medical doctors, a lot of people in the health sphere who know what they're talking about. They're qualified. They talk about how well our body self-heals. In EMDR, we sometimes use the analogy that, if you cut yourself, you don't need to sit there and tell your skin cells and tell your body how to heal the cut. It just does it. Your body just knows what to do. My experience is that EMDR is exactly like that. For some people, it's a little more complicated for different reasons that are for another podcast because that's a whole topic within itself. But it is entirely possible, and for many people, this is exactly what happens, that you will attend an EMDR session to process a traumatic experience, a traumatic memory, and literally all you will do is follow, well, sometimes it's fingers, sometimes you'll do tapping, sometimes you'll follow a dot on a screen, whatever your therapist uses. And you will follow that dot and you will go through the EMDR protocol, and with very little further intervention, your brain will process that memory. You will then think about it afterwards and go, oh, it's a bad thing that happened. Like, I know that it's a bad thing that happened. It's terrible. I feel very sad that happened to me, but I don't feel it in my body. I'm not distressed by it. It feels like the past is in the past. It will just happen. And I think throughout my career, it's actually shocked me at times. I have sat there at times and thought, no, there's no way this person is going, like, I'm going to have to pull pull out the big guns for this. And then I don't have to do very much at all. Sometimes I do have to do a lot, but once we set it up, which requires, knowledge and expertise and experience within itself, to know what to do with the EMDR, to know what memory to pick, to know how to set it up effectively. And I think the better that you get at that, the more likely it is to go smoothly. So that's probably why I've seen that more as I've progressed through my career. But it truly has astonished me how easily your brain will heal in the right circumstances, given the right conditions. Your brain doesn't need to be told how to heal. It knows what to do. I think it's been quite astonishing, quite remarkable at times, and has actually made me view humanity and the human spirit and our makeup very differently to before I started EMDR. Because it feels, I won't go into it too much because that's a little beyond the scope of a psychology podcast, but it kind of makes you think about the bigger picture and why our brains can heal it themselves, especially like when it comes to memory. But anyways, your brain wants to heal. So the next thing that has become very, actually, and another note there, I love to use the analogy of labor when it comes to EMDR. When I was pregnant with my son, I can't quite remember. It's funny because when it's happening, you think, I'll never forget this. This is going to be burned in my memory forever. And now he's 2 and I can't remember anything that happened. But when I was pregnant, I think I was like 41 weeks and a few days. Like I was approaching, it might have been 40 and something. I don't know, something like that. But it was approaching the point at which I wouldn't be able to give birth at the hospital that I wanted to give birth at because he was going to be too overdue. They were going to make me go to the more public hospital in the city and I just didn't want to go that far from home. So I got induced. Now, I think induction of labor is a really good analogy for how EMDR works because you don't need to tell your body how to have a baby. Your body knows what to do when it comes to growing babies and having babies. Sure, things go wrong, but for the most part, your body knows what to do. When I got induced, my body just needed a little kickstart to be able to get things going. But then from there, it knew what to do and it just did it. That's an excellent analogy for EMDR, where something's gone a bit wrong and your body just needs a jump start. We create the conditions, we get it started, but then it knows what to do. We don't need to, once we get it going, it will do it itself. Okay. I think that is a better analogy than the cut because it implies that we've had some interventions being required, but from there, your body knew what to do. So the second point, I probably should have written more notes about because I might fumble this a bit, but anyways. So I think society's general idea of what is trauma and what isn't trauma is wrong. I would say, so many people are surprised by this, right? I would say 90% of the trauma that I work with and what I help people with is emotional neglect and emotional abuse. Now, people are expecting, I think, that someone like me would predominantly be working with the more obvious stereotypical traumatic events, sexual violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse, being a victim of a crime, being attacked, having like a horrific accident or something. Those things do come up, absolutely. But it's maybe 15% of what I work with. Overwhelming majority is emotional neglect and emotional abuse. Now, it's really interesting because people will often come to trauma therapy with a suspicion that their past is involved, and usually they're right. It's not always that deep, but usually if people have a history and they're having trouble now, there's something related there. There's something we can do. So It's often the case, though, that people will come and they'll have some kind of problem. So maybe they have difficulty with people pleasing. Maybe they're really mean to themselves in their heads. They're very critical. They're very judging of themselves and they don't know why. Maybe they feel very anxious in different situations. Maybe they've got a lot of social anxiety or they just really feel not very confident in themselves. There is just so many things that can come up that people come for help with that they think is connected to their past. And so much of the time people will go, like, it must be this. And they'll pick out things, cherry pick things from their history that look bad. But then when we actually investigate, sometimes it has nothing to do with it. So, like, for example, maybe their mum forgot to pick them up from school. And they're like, well, I got abandoned. So maybe, but it's the logical brain, right? It's the logical brain trying to create cause and effect intellectual links between the past and the present. It's often incorrect. In EMDR, when we are developing the links, we use the body. We detect, where is the body taking us? Because the mind, the logical mind doesn't think the same way as the emotional brain does. They operate differently. So what is a link logically often is not accurate. So when people come in and they've got these preconceived ideas because they're thinking logically and they're using their stereotypes and their prior knowledge to what they think is likely the problem. Sometimes they're right, but I find most of the time it's either wrong or not the full story and kind of half right. But me doing my job properly, right, I will always confirm those links. I will make space for because often, people are quite invested in the link they've established, and they're like, I think this is it. So we'll check, but I also don't want to waste people's time and go, oh, okay, you figured it out, right? Let's process this memory, because what if it's wrong? What if it's not the actual problem? So those stereotypical traumas, we call them the capital T traumas. It's not an official language, but it's what the trauma world often used to categorize the more like stereotypical trauma events, the PTSD, the ones we think about when we think PTSD, natural disasters, victim of a crime, like I said before, the big events, the stereotypically big events. But like I said, more often than not, it's actually the lowercase t traumas that are a bit quieter, they're smaller, but they're meaningful. They are so, so meaningful. I've got a study here that I think is really interesting. So that it was a hospital, a facility in the Netherlands called Cytrek, the group of researchers there, the clinicians that work there and work with that facility, have been extremely influential in the trauma world and particularly in the EMDR world. They have just done incredible research that has helped us learn so much. The EMDR community have a lot to be grateful for with this group. They've just done amazing work. So in 2020, they did a study on 97 people who had a primary diagnosis. So they may have had other diagnoses, but their primary diagnosis, like the one that was causing them the most trouble, the most impairing one, was a personality disorder. And about a quarter of those people had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So they were really struggling, suffering. But they excluded anybody who met criteria for PTSD. So these people had personality disorders and were very unwell, but they did not have PTSD. So they either didn't have the capital T trauma experiences, or they did not meet criteria for PTSD. So those experiences were not a problem for them, according to this study.
After just 5 sessions of EMDR targeting memories of things like emotional neglect and emotional abuse, so these are the experiences that do not tick the boxes of a formal PTSD diagnosis, they do not fit that characteristic capital T trauma idea. After 5 sessions of EMDR targeting emotional neglect and emotional abuse, and like I said, with the people I work with, emotional neglect and emotional abuse is the vast majority of what I work on. By far, it's not even close. The therapy worked for this group and their symptoms significantly improved. Okay, so this is a really good illustration that what we often think about as the problem and with the way we stereotypically think about trauma, I think is not quite right. We underemphasize the incredible importance of emotional neglect and emotional abuse. And we overemphasize other things. Obviously, PTSD level events are always bad, but I think people look for a problem that isn't there because they're expecting it to be a big event, but more likely it's the smaller ones. So, and just to clarify, those smaller events, just to give some examples, emotional neglect and emotional abuse, this really fits experiences like feeling rejected as a child, feeling ignored, feeling abandoned, being treated in ways that leave you feeling unimportant and worthless. So I think those are that we do not give enough attention to those things.
The next point that I've come to learn is that the trauma world, how I would say it, chronically over-pathologizes. Now, I am a big, trauma is my world. It is all I do. I'm a trauma therapist. I do trauma therapy. I mostly do EMDR therapy, but I don't like to burrow myself into a hole with that because it doesn't work for everybody, right? Nothing does. EMDR is a fabulous therapy and I love it. I'm very, very passionate about it. I've really made my career about it, actually. But I'm also realistic in acknowledging it. Not everybody is a good candidate for anything, right? So you don't want to hole yourself into one thing. But the trauma world, I think I got to a point in my career where I was looking for trauma to the point where I was creating it in some cases, where I would meet a client and I'd be going, well, I've got my binoculars on. Where's the trauma? Let's find it. Let's make it up if it's not there. I think I had been trained in a way that everything means something. Everything, you've overreacted. What's it linked to? What happened in your past? The biggest thing I've learned is it's not always that deep. Not everything means something. Not everything is about your past. And to assume that everything that's abnormal or everything that you notice and feel and think is related to something in your past is just blatantly incorrect. And going to drive you crazy because you're going to start digging into your past and trying to create a problem where there might not be one. Not to say that there's not a problem, but it might not be your past that's the problem. And to reduce, it's a very reductionist approach that everything is trauma. It's not true. It's just not true. I've learned that very clearly through my work. Some people come for trauma therapy because they've had this narrative that everything means something and everything is about your past and everything is about trauma. It's not true. Some of the things that go wrong for you, some of your symptoms, some of your problems, the things that you have difficulty with, the things that you want to be different, they're problems, but they're not necessarily about trauma. They can be about, there are so many things that can cause a problem. So I think this is something that the wellness space, social media is terrible. Everything means something. What does it mean? Let's find the problem. It's just not always that deep. Sometimes it is, of course. I would not have a job if it wasn't sometimes, but I don't make assumptions. I want the truth. I want to find the truth because if we assume that your past is the problem and we are we have an agenda and we're fixated on that as our target, and it's not there. What a waste of your time, and what a spirally kind of thought process we're engaging in there, where we're trying to force a problem where there isn't one, and actually ignoring and not even looking elsewhere to actually try to solve the problem. So trauma world over-pathologizes. The last point that I have here is the limited number of ways. Another thing that I've learned, the limited number of ways that things can go wrong. I find this fascinating. When it comes to trauma, it's so fascinating because it's this dialectic, like we say in dialectical behavior therapy, which has a really bad reputation, but I don't mind it. There's this dialectic, this irony about trauma, that it is both exceptionally complex, but also astonishingly simple. It's hard to explain, but there are a limited number of ways that things can go wrong in your brain, which I find really fascinating. There's a pattern to it. There's pattern to it. There is a structure to how your brain, how things get stuck. And that's why we are able in trauma-focused therapies, and I'm going to speak to EMDR specifically because it's where most of my education and experience is. In EMDR, when I'm assessing somebody, because of the structure and because of what we understand and the way we've been able to organize the patterns and the nature in which trauma occurs in people, when someone tells me their story, I can figure out where things have gone wrong within an hour or two, and to a pretty, for not everybody, obviously if somebody's got a super complex story and it's really convoluted and blah, blah, everywhere, it might take longer, but I think the average, I can figure it out pretty quickly, and it's not because I'm a genius, it's because there is a pattern to things, and there's a pattern to how things go wrong. There is a structure, there is an architecture to how trauma occurs and how it's healed. It's predictable. It occurs in the same way every time. Every single time, there is a general structure to the way that your brain processes a memory, to the point where it is highly predictable, and to the point where I can detect a problem with processing within a minute of it happening because it's not following the structure that it should. So make of that what you will, but I'm sure you'll understand now why I'm a bit like, what does this mean? I don't know. I get a little bit bigger picture about it almost, because I'm like, this is quite remarkable that our brain is so highly structured and can do this. The problem occurs in a structured way and the healing occurs in a structured way, and it's all malleable and workable. It's quite incredible. So I'm humbled. I'm constantly humbled. Every session I have of EMDR, I sit there like, this feels like a miracle every time I do it. It's not though. It's scientific. It's all in the research. I'm not doing anything that the researchers haven't found, but it's sort of like witnessing childbirth. It happens every second of every day babies are born, but it never ceases to be less miraculous and less incredible when you witness it. You feel humbled witnessing it. I feel like that a little bit in my EMDR sessions, that you're witnessing this amazing thing that the body can do very naturally. So I think that's it for my bonus episode. I hope you found it interesting. This is the end of my first season. Thank you so much if you've listened. It just means so much to me. I've got some really exciting stuff coming. I've got some other projects in tow. So subscribe to the mailing list so you get updates. And I think I'll leave you there, and I will talk to you soon. That's it for today's episode of the Trauma Nerd podcast. If you felt validated, yay. If you felt challenged, double yay. If you found this useful, you can follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in trauma-focused therapy or resources, you can find more information at my website. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.